Welcome back to another episode of Life in the Stands podcast. We have Bender, Zach, and Beans back on the podcast today. We're excited to have Beans back on. We have the Niners playing this weekend, so we got to have Beans back on so we can talk about some of the NFL playoffs, obviously. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube. Remember to follow all of our socials, our Twitter, our TikTok. It's stands_life and Life in the Stands. Also, make sure to follow us on Spotify. We have a pretty good episode today. We're going to talk about some storylines from this past NFL action of this past weekend, as well as, like I mentioned, some picks for the next round coming up. We'll also talk about the coaching carousel in the NFL. There's a lot of head coach names that are out there, as well as a lot of open positions. So we'll discuss that a little bit too. But first up, we're going to get right into some storylines from last weekend. So Bender, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so storyline I'm going to go with has to do with the NFC East. There was a lot this weekend that happened, including the Cowboys and the Eagles. There's something specifically I'd like to talk about in regards to this, and that would be the coaching staffs. Um, Whether they get fired or not, I expect Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn to get fired here soon. There's a lot of talk with Bill Belichick, which we'll get into a lot later in the podcast. But I think even if those two stay with the Cowboys, I think Sirianni stays with the Eagles. Um, you'll see them on the hot seat right away next season. I think it's something to talk about just because of the way the Eagles collapsed. The Cowboys ended how they always end the season and disappointment. So I think there's a lot to talk about with the NFC East, as well as getting into the draft. I expect either the Commanders or the Giants or both to draft a up and coming quarterback in the draft. And I think that will make a big difference in our division. It'll make it more competitive. So I think the NFC East will actually be more open next year than ever. You'll see a lot of roster moves, especially Eagles defense. You might see a Dak Prescott move. I don't know how the Cowboys are going to handle that situation, but you'll see a huge mix up in the NFC East next year and can't wait to
Can't
see what
wait
happens.
to-
Beans, what do you think about that? I thought it was interesting that Bender thinks the Commanders are drafting a QB too.
I don't think it's that surprising. I think you got Adam Peters from the Niners as their new GM. I'm pretty sure he's taking interviews right now for head coaches. So I think that with the draft pick that they have, I think they have number three
Gotta be early.
overall,
Gotta be early,
something like
top
that.
five. Yeah.
They're in like the best position to do that, other than the Bears. So if you're not going to do it now, are you going to be bad enough to be in a position next year, or are you going to take your shot this year?
That's fair. I think another interesting point that Bender made is about some of the expiring contracts on the Eagles team. Like, I mean, they
Mhm.
really kind of went all in. Like they have a lot of 1 year deal guys. They made some trades during the season that they brought people in, and yeah, like the thing that comes to mind are
Retirements.
fired, right? Who'd you say?
You got retirements happening with
Yeah, and
Jason
retirement's happening.
Pierre-Paul.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are going to be a completely different team. They're going to really have to go through, a decent bit of a rebuild in order to, I think, get back to the level of competition that they've been at the past couple of years, both on the offensive and
Significant
the
numbers.
defensive side.
Yeah, significant
Sure.
numbers being replaced for sure.
Yeah,
There's something else I want to mention, and we tweeted about this a couple days ago before they even played their game. AJ Brown deleted all Eagles stuff from his socials. I think you could see a blow up on both sides of the ball, not just the defense.
definitely. And with AJ Brown specifically now, you don't want to say it's becoming a trend because this is only the second time that he's really had a situation like this. But in Tennessee, I don't think it was entirely one-sided from the organization. I think AJ Brown had a little bit of a part to play in that too. And now it seems like he was a little bit of an instigator in Philadelphia, removing all this stuff before the playoff game. I saw he was at some sort of club or something, some sort of
Hmm.
party or something like the night before the game was supposed to happen too. So now there's starting
Yeah.
to be questions around what you're really getting with AJ Brown, which I didn't think was a storyline before this Eagles collapse over the last couple of weeks. So I think that's really
Yeah,
interesting too.
yeah, and you don't win what one game in the last seven without something happening in that locker room. I don't know if it was through coaching or leadership or AJ Brown by himself. Like I don't want to put the
We're
full
getting
blame
an
on
ass
AJ
kicked by
Brown.
the Niners.
Yeah, I don't want to put. Yeah, I think the start of everything was the Niners exposed them, so I will give you credit on that one. But I just think it's more than just AJ Brown in that locker room right now.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And I'll jump into my storyline here in a second too, but I think one more thing that has to be mentioned, Dan Quinn with all that talent on that Cowboys defense. how many points did they get? 48 points to the Packers
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
that wild card game. And I saw something was interesting too. Pretty much every home team won their game this past weekend, except for the Cowboys, who had won
Good for
their
the Cowboys.
previous 17 games at home.
Yes.
Mhm.
And something I saw and I completely agree with, if Dan Quinn has head coaching offers out there, he should take one now before they look at him in a different view right now.
Definitely, definitely. I think that game, I mean, at a certain point, it's the players, and at a certain point, it's the coaching, and at a certain point, it's both. You give up close to
Yeah.
50 points at home in a wild card game, it's both.
Yeah.
Because it
And
even
that's
makes me
exactly why
question, like, makes me question Micah, makes me question the other dudes in that defense, right? Like,
yeah, you can't
Mhm.
be having an MVP season like Dak did, or you can't be getting compared to Lawrence Taylor and show up the way you did, or didn't show up, rather. If you're
yeah,
Micah Parsons, I also think some of that is Dan Quinn. There was a specific play I recognized where they dropped Micah into coverage. I just don't think it was that time of game to be trying that. We need to make a big play. They were driving on us. Somehow Romeo Dobbs gets wide open every time they need a play. It almost looked like we were throwing the game at times. Like
I mean,
I'm
Romeo
just very
Dobbs looked like
confused.
Calvin Johnson out there
Yeah,
against
I'm
them.
just very confused on how we let all that happen. And I think some of that is the players and not showing up when you need to, and definitely Dan Quinn.
Yeah,
I put
scheme stuff, you can
every
tell
single
guys
part
are
of
wide
that
open.
on Mike McCarthy. I think Mike McCarthy needs to look at in the mirror and think to himself, with all this talent, with all this experience that I should have in the playoffs with the Packers, I just don't see how you look at anybody else but the guy that's running the show there. Um, and his incredible misuse of the talent and the coaching staff that he does have. Now, I also agree that Dan Quinn, tale as old as time, is his defense is getting picked apart in the offseason or in the in the playoffs and stuff like that. Like that's you simplicity only takes you so far. You need to throw some wrinkles in there. Um, but yeah, I think that the Cowboys just need to restart with head coach and you know go after a big name like Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick.
Yeah, one last comment, and then I'll pass it off to Zach for his headline for the weekend. But I think it's pretty funny that this could possibly be the second time that the Green Bay Packers have fired Mike McCarthy.
It's a good
That's
point.
insane.
It's a good point. Um,
He needs to go take a
geez.
nap.
Yeah, geez. Have you seen the similarities between the 2010 Packers championship team too and the 2023 Packers team? It's kind of insane, which we can talk about a little bit later too. But I think the Packers aren't completely out of it. A lot of people aren't going to give them a shot, I think, but we can get to that a little bit too. For my storyline for this past weekend, I think for me it was all about the young QBs. I think C.J. Stroud and Jordan Love both had the same exact stat line within like 2 or 3 passing yards of each other. It's like 16 of
Mm-hmm.
21, like 270 plus, and like 3 touchdowns, and both had like close
Yeah,
to perfect quarterback ratings, right?
yeah,
And I feel
150
like I've been
pounds.
I've been
Who was talking
touting
about that?
yeah, I've been talking CJ Stroud a lot. Like I think CJ Stroud, I've been on that bandwagon a good bit ever since I think they played the Steelers, and I watched him throw like 2 trips left, a backyard 15-yard out route, like on time in rhythm after like a 7-step drop, getting through his first 2 reads, getting to a third
Mm-hmm.
read and hitting that like on the head. So like after, I mean like I've been on CJ Stroud for a while, but Jordan Love I think has really come on near the end of the season. Obviously, his last couple of games, like his last like 6 or 7 games, he has like 18 touchdowns and 1 pick going into the playoffs, and then he obviously did what he did to the Cowboys defense. So I'm really excited about where the league is going because C.J. Stroud, Jordan Love are I think next year going to be looked at like Mahomes, Josh Allen, Burrow style QBs. They're going to be within that top 6 to 8 sort of QB ranking. And I haven't even mentioned other young guys like a Purdy or like a Jalen Hurts that just got knocked out. Like Jalen Hurts is still really young, and people don't realize that, right? Purdy is still really young, even though, it seems like people like he has this aura about him that he is older because he spent some time on the bench and like maybe he spent a couple more years in college. But Purdy's still really young, so I'm seeing a lot of QBs that are like 28 and younger in the league that I'm really excited about because even Mahomes I think is 28,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
right? So, I mean, and QBs play, until they're 35, 36, like pretty regularly and pretty easily. So, I'm really excited about the next like 10 or 15 years of quarterback play in the league. That's not something I would have said at the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, I would have said the opposite. Actually, I think we talked about that in the podcast earlier, that the overall level of like QB play in the league is just like deteriorating. Like it's not as good. You have a lot of like mediocreness, but not a lot of like
Hmm.
great QBs. I'm seeing a couple of great QBs kind of grow up in front of our eyes, and that's exciting.
That's awesome. Yep, I agree. I
Yeah.
guess for my storyline too, I'm gonna bounce off of what Zach said, and I'm gonna go with a stark contrast to the youth movement is, if every single team that won, minus maybe one or two teams, they played good defense and they ran the ball. Both of those things are, kind of as tale as old as time is, play good defense, run the ball, and you're going to win in the postseason. And you'll see teams like the Niners, like the Texans, like the Packers are going to want to run the ball to help their quarterback, their young quarterback, succeed in the playoffs. This round and hopefully rounds in the future. So I think that one is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's just as kind of as cool as it gets with these young quarterbacks having these great running backs, right? Christian McCaffrey, AJ, or AJ Dillon's hurt, I guess, but Aaron Jones. The Lions have two running backs to David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. You have James Cook with the Bills. They play great defense. Like it's a recipe that just doesn't get old.
Something I want to add on to that is actually involving the quarterbacks as well. I see a lot of mobile quarterbacks in the league. That's not just the running backs.
Hmm.
You have Lamar Jackson, for example. We saw a 50-yard plus touchdown run from Josh Allen this past weekend against the Steelers. So I think that's also a
Sweet.
movement in the league as well as running quarterbacks. Um, so I think that's also very exciting.
Did you think that was a
Not.
fake slide or do you think that was a juke?
Oh, I
Huh?
think he ran him over. I think he ran Casey over.
Oh, yeah, I think he's just a tank.
Yeah.
Just he's built like that.
If you watch like
There
the
you go.
end zone angle from behind Josh Allen, like he just runs him over. Like Casey makes pretty good contact. Casey was I was Bender and I were texting during the game. I was kind of pissed because I was like, this is the dude that, like Demonte Casey that just got suspended from the NFL for 3 games because he hits people too hard, and Josh Allen just punched him into the snow
Dirt.
and ran another 40 yards.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I thought
What?
that
Crazy.
the a crazy part of that play too was the way he accelerated coming out of that.
Yeah.
Like, where
Yep.
did he turn on the turbo? Like,
I mean, to be fair, it's also Pat Pete chasing him down, and Pat Pete,
he's
great
old.
season for the Steelers. Happy that he was there for Joey Porter Jr. and those kind of things. But he's
Whoa.
old. Like Pat Pete should not have a starting caliber like position. Maybe as like a nickel or like some sort of like dime package in the next couple of years of his career as like a mentor role for a team. But he should not be a starting secondary piece anymore. I just watched
For
all year
sure.
should be the case. But yeah, I think Beans, you make a lot of good points, like running the ball and playing good defense. And to Bender's point about running quarterbacks, I think also just like good quarterbacks in general. If you look at the last 8 teams that are remaining, think about the quarterbacks that are on those teams. Like just look at the AFC. You have C.J. Stroud, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and
No, Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson.
Lamar
Those are
Jackson.
your 4 AFC QBs that are remaining, right? You look at the NFC side, it's Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, and then you have, help me out,
Baker and
Baker
Jared Goff.
Mayfield,
Baker and
Jared
Jared
Goff.
Goff. Obviously, Jared Goff has kind of earned his respect at this point. Like Jared Goff is a top 10 NFL QB.
But he's
He,
he's a
he,
Super
he's earned
Bowl
his stripes.
quarterback too.
He's a
Like,
Super Bowl
Jared Goff has
quarterback,
made the Super Bowl. So
right? Baker Mayfield career
Then scoring
revitalization,
points.
right? And then obviously Jordan Love and Brock Purdy having great breakout years. Brock Purdy maybe even last year to a certain extent. But I mean, last 8 teams remaining have 8 of the top 15 quarterbacks. Like you got to
yeah.
be in the top half of the league in that category if you want to get to this point. And I think that's pretty evident this year too.
Something we should get into eventually, and I know we're going to be talking about the coaching carousel and people losing their jobs and hirings and stuff. I think you also have some of the best coaches in the last 8 remaining teams as well. From D'Amico Ryans to Shanahan to Campbell, like all those guys are
Harbaugh,
all very good. Yeah, all very good
Mhm.
quarterbacks. Or yeah, quarterbacks, coaches. Excuse me.
Yeah.
for sure. All right. Well,
Yeah,
with that
Look
being
forward to it.
said, that was sort of like all of last week's storylines. Definitely was a fun weekend of wild card football. As sort of a side note, this is what the second year with having a 7 seed, second or third year having a 7
Yeah.
seed, and
I
having it
think it's
play
the
out like
second
this.
year.
Yeah, how do you
Mhm.
guys like the 7 seed for both conferences versus the 6 seed? Just as a quick sidebar.
I like it so far. I mean, you're seeing 7 seeds, do something, which allows the kind of the argument of having another playoff team is, you're watering down the product. I disagree. I think that, I mean, the Packers are proving that argument
The
wrong.
Steelers put up a fight too, Beans.
Yeah. So and I think it's going to be a really good game against the number 1 seed this upcoming weekend. So I think that it's been a success. I mean, the NFL's printing money off this weekend. So
Yeah,
Printing money, yeah.
I think that only having one team with a bye week also makes people fight a little bit harder towards the end of the season. You can't rest as many people. So that also is good
especially
for
for the
value.
Niners.
Yeah. So fighting for the 1 seed and fighting for the 7 seed at this point makes the end of the season worth watching.
Yeah, the one bye week I think is super interesting.
Yes.
And yeah, the 7 seeds have been competitive now, so
Mm.
very interesting. But let's jump into this next set of games then for this upcoming weekend. Let's look at that Green Bay game, the 7 seed going into San Francisco. And I feel like we should probably let Beans take the first crack at this one.
I'm not gonna keep it. I'm just gonna keep it pretty short. I think the Niners are gonna win. I think that they haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher. The Packers need a 100-yard rusher to win. And I think that they have an awful run defense. I think that the Niners have the best running game in the league.
The Niners
Super
haven't
easy.
allowed a 100-yard rusher all year.
Nope. The Cardinals had 200 yards, but James Conner led the team in rushing at 88 yards, I believe. Haven't allowed a single 100-yard rusher.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Very
so I have the Niners in this one. I'm happy to see Jordan Love playing well. I just don't think the guys around him are developed enough to go against a loaded Niners team. I just think it'll be too much. And I think McCaffrey's going to go off. I think he gets 150 plus rush yards, not even total yards.
Yeah, I think this game actually is less about Jordan Love and the Packers offense and more about the Packers defense. I think that the Packers probably put up a decent amount of points. The Packers might hit 30 points in this game. I think that the young receivers on the Packers are actually really talented, more talented than the people give them credit for. But I don't think there's any chance that the Packers slow down everything that San Francisco does. I think, if I say that there's a chance Green Bay hits 30, I think there's a chance San Francisco hits 45 or 50 with the way that game is going to be played. So I think it'll be very offensive, probably a shootout. I think the Packers are still going to put up points, though. They're not going to be entirely shut out. Um, let's talk about the other NFC game. Let's do Tampa Bay and Detroit. A lot of Detroit fans very happy after this weekend, Beans.
I knew they would be. I think that they deserved to win. They played defense. They kept the Rams from scoring enough points to overtake them. I thought that they played well. I was kind of worried about that defense going in, but they're battle tested after round one. I don't think that Baker is going to have enough, even with Rashad White and um, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I don't think they're going to be able to score enough points to keep up with Jahmyr Gibbs and the Lions. So I'm going with the Lions to go to the NFC Championship game against the Niners.
Yeah, I think we have another close one to look forward to between the Bucks and the Lions. But I think with the way the Lions defense looked in round one, I think we'll get to Baker. It just won't be enough. Aiden Hutchinson, Michigan guy, played really well. I think he had 2 sacks. Big plays matter on defense. So what are you counting over
All
there?
them on your wall.
Hey man, gotta support. But yeah, I got the Lions in this one.
Yeah, if you didn't know, Bender likes Michigan-based teams, but I agree that I'm going to take the Lions in this one, but my reasoning's a little bit different. In round two of the playoffs, I'm just going to take the team that had the closer game in round one. Lions had to kind of grit that game out. I don't think there was actually a huge test for the Bucks. I don't think that Eagles team was actually that difficult to play against. I think the spirit was kind of broken
All
of that
bark, no
team.
bucket.
Yeah, right. So I think like by the end of that game, like Tampa Bay, what was the final score? Like 32-9 or something was the
32,
final
32
score
to
of that
9.
game.
Yeah.
Like that's not a real playoff game. So I think that the Bucks are going to go into Ford Field and they're going to get smacked in the mouth a little bit by a Lions team that has had to
Very
already go
inconsistent.
through some of those battles and stuff. I think that really makes a difference in playoff football.
If you heard
Yeah.
post-game interviews, the Lions were ready for the Cowboys, but they aren't getting the Cowboys, obviously. But the Lions were fuming over that, so I think there was some motivation there. But now I think the fact that they get a second home game out of it makes up for all that.
Home game is interesting, but I think it's a decent point that you made there regardless, because if you were expecting to play the Cowboys and now you have the Buccaneers rolling into town with Baker Mayfield, hopefully there's not a letdown, because that could also, I think, be the case.
I
You
was
don't
just
think
gonna
of
say,
that
I
with
think
Dan Campbell, but
if you're expecting the Cowboys and they get smacked in their mouth after the Bucks just smacked the Eagles in their mouth, I could, it'll be a close game for sure. I think that Baker Mayfield, I think he's got something to him in the playoffs for sure.
yeah, it'll be interesting. All right, let's jump over to the AFC games. Let's talk about the one seed again. Let's go Baltimore first, hosting the Texans. This is an interesting matchup. Bender, let's ask Bender first. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I have the Ravens losing this one, believe it or not. Y'all thought I was gonna say they're gonna win, huh? But no.
Got beans and that both.
Yeah. No, but I think CJ Stroud is gonna prove that he should have won MVP even though he got hurt. I think they will at the end of the day give it to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson will fall short again. I think that's going to be a big storyline headed into next year. Um, all they do is talk about quarterbacks and media. So sorry, Lamar Jackson, but it's not your year once again.
Sorry,
CJ
Kyle.
Stroud will carry his team to the win. I think it'll be a high scoring game. You could see both scores in the 30s on this one. I think it could be like 34-31 maybe. But yeah, Texans win this.
Beans.
I think you guys are going too crazy with these scores. This is still playoff football at the end of the day, and this is where the weak get weeded out. And I think these games are going to be a lot closer than we think. But I definitely think that Lamar Jackson's going to win this one. I don't know. Knowing D'Amico Ryans and knowing how his defense plays, he is susceptible, and that defense is susceptible to mobile quarterbacks. And Lamar Jackson is your number one nightmare when you're talking about dual threat quarterbacks. I think that the Ravens defense matches up well against the Texans offense. They have so many pieces on that defense. Roquan Smith is everywhere. Kyle Hamilton is everywhere back here. Like it's insane. I think they're gonna keep it close, but I think they're gonna win pretty handily. I think the score's gonna look a little bit better than it's gonna look on the field.
That's for all the listeners that don't understand defensive positions very well. It's a really good illustration. It's just Roquan Smith is just up here, just like this, and then Kyle Hamilton's just back here. For everyone that doesn't know football terms, it's a really good way to describe what happens on that Ravens defense. But I agree. I like every bone in my body wants to pick the Texans because obviously I hate the Ravens. But if I'm going to be completely honest with myself, I think the Steelers were the only team in the AFC that were going to beat the Ravens in this year's playoffs.
Yeah,
And
familiarity is.
yeah, like familiarity, and like the Steelers just know how to play Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson never plays well against Pittsburgh, but every other AFC team that they played against this year, they've steamrolled, and it hasn't been close. So I want to believe that another AFC team has a chance against Baltimore, but everything that this season has shown me shows me that they don't. So I think it will be close. Like they're not going to do what they did to the Dolphins against the Texans, but I do think Baltimore wins this game. Although obviously huge CJ Stroud fan, huge Texans fan, I think that they will be a really good team over the next couple of years now with D'Amico and CJ Stroud running the ship there.
Mhm.
Okay, this game is super interesting. Kansas City and Buffalo. There are so many storylines to talk about. We're already all smirking because there's so much to talk about. Beans,
It's
you
such
can
a
take
good
the
game. It's
first
such a
crack at
good
this
game.
one.
Like what iteration of this matchup is it? Like the fifth one
Yeah,
across like all the big games in their career?
not enough.
Not enough, 100%. I'm super excited for this game. I think that both teams throughout the season have had pretty like similar storylines of having super high expectations and not really meeting those expectations, but just getting in enough. And they're both getting hot at the end of the year. They, like I said earlier, I mean, look at the running backs for both teams. Look at the defenses for both teams. They're familiar with each other. It's just the best matchup I think of the entire weekend. And I'm a diehard Niners fan. I'm super excited for this game. I think that the Bills get it done, though. I think that Josh Allen and his ability to make plays down the field with his arm and his legs is going to be the difference in this game. And I think that they're going to go to the AFC Championship game versus the Ravens.
Yeah, talk about it being a great matchup. If you think about it, all the drama that it's even caused, even changing rules in overtime, losing to
Mhm.
a coin toss. You want to say they lost to a coin toss? Sure, fine. Play some defense in the fourth quarter, and maybe you wouldn't be in that position.
Play some
Um,
defense for 12 seconds, you mean?
yes, yes. So,
Illegal
but
offensive formation from this year.
yeah, I think I think the Bills actually lose again. I think it'll be a closer game, like usual, but I think it's going to be Chiefs 28-24. Um, if you guys tuned in last time, I have the Chiefs and the Niners in the Super Bowl. I think the Chiefs have got their feet underneath them, even though they were struggling all year. Rashid Rice went off last week as well. I think their offense is going to start getting going, and you'll see them in the Super Bowl again. And yes, Beans, I did have the Niners beating the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Beans and I don't have Super Bowl predictions out there yet, so that's a whole nother topic of conversation. We'll have to get to that at some point. But in this
Can I
game,
say
I'm
right
gonna,
now?
yeah, go ahead before I
I think it's gonna be Niners Ravens. I think it's 2012
Niners
rematch,
Ravens.
and
Niners
I'm
Ravens.
hyped for that matchup.
It's hard to bet against the Niners in the NFC for obvious reasons. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Lions Bills as my prediction.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, those are two. Those are just two sad ass franchises.
yeah, Lions. I mean, if you really wanted to be sad, I would have said Lions Texans, but don't make me go there. But but Lions Bills, I think is what's gonna be our prediction, and that leads right into my pick for Kansas City and Buffalo. I think what you guys both have not mentioned is that this is Patrick Mahomes' first playoff game outside of his home stadium. That is not a Super Bowl. This is his first
I didn't
road
know that
playoff
fact.
game.
I didn't know that.
He's been
In
he's
his
been
career,
he's been a 1 seed. He's been a 2 seed. He's been at home his
and it,
entire
but
playoff career.
that's actually a true fact. He's
It's a
never
true
played
fact.
Yes,
a playoff game
This
not
is
at
yeah,
his home field.
this is his
yes.
first road playoff game, and you saw what the conditions were like in Buffalo, and you saw what the response
Crazy.
was to them moving the game by a day. That will not happen this time. The game will not be moved. If there is bad weather, it is being played. And I'm not saying that Kansas City's afraid of bad weather, but I'm saying Kansas City should be afraid of bad weather in Buffalo.
Right.
So I think Buffalo. I think the Bills win this game because it's the first time that when it matters, the home field advantage is slanted away from Mahomes and towards Josh Allen. And
Mhm.
if Josh Allen doesn't take advantage of it this season, then I think
When
you have
is
to
he
start
gonna do
asking the same kind of questions you're asking about Lamar and him not making it.
it? Mhm.
And you have to start thinking about that with Josh Allen. But I think the Bills win that game because of that home field advantage. So
Sure.
that wraps up all of the picks for this upcoming weekend. It should be a great couple of games. Two really good AFC games, two really good NFC games. But we're gonna jump over now to the teams that are not playing anymore. The teams that have some higher and bigger issues to deal with than how they're gonna guard McCaffrey or Lamar Jackson this weekend. So Bender, let's go ahead and walk us through some coaching vacancies and some potential fits for those vacancies.
Cowboys.
Yes. So I actually have five coaches on my list over here. And all of us are going to give our takes on where we think they should land or where we want them to land. There's obviously some vacancies that haven't opened up yet with
Cowboys.
the Cowboys or the Eagles. Um,
You
so
do have a vacancy on your
kind of
forehead, though.
we'll make our
This is
predictions,
why I
give
wear
our take.
beanies.
Come on, man. But no, we will start with Beans on this one. The first coach I have on the list is Ben Johnson of the Lions.
Where do I think he's going to go, or where do I want him to go, or both? Mixture
Both,
of both. I
both.
think he goes to the Chargers. I think that he goes to the Chargers or he stays in Detroit. I think it strongly depends on how the Lions do in the playoffs. But I think that the Chargers are the only logical option for Ben Johnson because that's the only quarterback I would leave for right now unless I have a better opportunity to do so.
I
Okay,
actually love that idea.
pause real quick. We have breaking news on the podcast. Um,
Ooh, this is sick. First time
it's
ever.
it's for the NBA. We have the Indiana Pacers finalizing a trade for Pascal Siakam,
No
and
way.
the deal includes Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, and three first-round picks to Toronto, and New Orleans will be the third team in the deal, sending Kira Lewis to the Raptors. So big trade. Um, we will get into more trade deadline stuff in a future podcast, but this was much needed news. We did just release a trade deadline podcast and predictions a couple days ago, and I think this is the move the Pacers needed, and I think you'll see them possibly in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, we highlighted that move in a previous episode. Make sure you go check that out. But that's a big deal. 3 first-round picks heading back for that Siakam trade too.
For sure.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to jump into that more. Let's get back into
My
head
brain's
coaching here
trying to
for a
like
second.
figure out what happened. I'm so bad with NBA trades. I'm so bad with them.
But
NFL trades are so much
It's a big
easier.
deal. That's a big one for sure. But yeah, Ben
yeah,
Johnson. I mean, I don't want to say anything other than the Chargers. That sounds like a fantastic
Right.
idea.
What he can do for Austin Eckler and Justin Herbert at the same time.
I'm gonna
Amazing.
go away from the Chargers with mine, actually. I'm gonna go with the Falcons. I think he will be the one to unlock
Hmm.
Kyle Pitts and find a combination of Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson.
I
I
like that
think
He's
too.
a
he will
quarterback.
see they're gonna go into the draft and or trade for a quarterback, I believe.
Okay.
So I think just having a young developing team, I think he will be the guy to do it. And I think you have pieces to work with to do it.
I like that a lot.
Um, let's go
Belichick
to our
already.
let's go to our next, probably the most interesting to people. Let's go to our next coach. Let's go with Bill Belichick.
I'm gonna take the
I
first stab at this one, Beans. I'm gonna take the
okay,
first
yeah,
stab at
I
this
got
one.
you.
I want to see Bill Belichick in Washington. I want to see him with the Commanders, and I
For
want to
what
see him
reason?
with the What? Oh, what'd you say?
Like why?
I want to see him with the Commanders because I think it's the team with the least amount of direction right now. I think when you look at the Commanders roster, there's so many uncertainties and unknowns, and I think that's the best case scenario for Bill Belichick because
Plus,
any
they have some
like
defensive pieces.
yeah, they have some defensive pieces, right? And like that's neither here nor there because I think like every coaching vacancy right now has like pieces, right? That's the point of there being a vacancy is that there's probably pieces and not a team. But I think with
Mhm.
Bill Belichick, you want the opportunity to go in and like mold something around you again. Like you don't want people saying, "Oh, we need to draft Mac Jones and we need to play Mac Jones and we need to start Jimmy and trade Tom or whatever it was, right? Like he wants to have all of that control back in his mitts, and I think Washington is probably the place that's most likely that he'll get that.
I am very curious to see you say that because I think that Bill Belichick should do the opposite of what he's been doing because he's over 70 years old. I think that he's chasing the wins record. I think that he needs to go to a team that's ready to win now. And I think he needs to play more of a coach role and less of a, evil mastermind of the entire franchise. That's why I think that he should call up Jerry Jones and say, "Hey man, I'm on the way right now. Clear out Mike McCarthy's shit or I'm, or I'm gone." Is Jerry gonna say no? Absolutely not. I think that, like I said earlier, Mike McCarthy being the sole, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, being the sole reason that the Cowboys have zero playoff success over the last 3 years. I think that he can come in, take the great roster that he has, work with a group of guys who's done it for a long time at a pretty decently high level, and I think that he can cement himself as the true greatest coach of all time.
I think it's crazy that you say Mike McCarthy is the sole reason for the Cowboys not having any playoff success when Dak Prescott literally exists.
But who coaches Dak
This is
Prescott?
true. So let's move on. We have about 2 minutes or so here. Let's do one
Fair
more
beans.
coach. I have Bill Belichick actually going to the Chargers. I think they have a quarterback that can win you some games for that win record. So I think that will be his destination. Last one here, Mike Vrabel.
See, I
I'll
think
let
this
you
is
take the
a,
first shot.
I think this is a good spot for him and the Falcons because I think that I mean Arthur Smith was on the Titans to get a job with the Falcons, and then Vrabel's going to come in after him with what he built and do it better. I just think that that's a perfect storyline, and I think that's the best fit. I also think that Washington would be a good fit, kind of like with what Zach said, with kind of being directionless. I think that Mike Vrabel has a really good CEO vibe that can just steer a franchise in the right direction with being paired with an outstanding, in my opinion, outstanding guy with with drafting players and stuff like that, and Adam Peters. Him being the GM with Variable as the head coach. Actually, I'm switching it. I think he should go to Washington. I think he should go to Washington.
Yeah, I actually have Vrabel going to the Cowboys, and I think Derrick Henry follows him, and we'll get the run game going in Dallas.
Yeah.
DeMarco Murray
I
2.0.
I mean, I like the I like the Falcons the most, I think, in this situation because it reminds me the most of what the Titans had.
Mhm.
You have Kyle Pitts and you have Drake London, great receivers going over the middle and everything. You got a ground and pound game with Algier
Two
and
running
Bijan
backs.
Robinson that you can rely on, and you got defensive pieces there. You got really good secondary pieces. Jesse Bates reminds me of a younger Kevin Byard, all those kinds of things. So I think I'll take the Falcons in that situation.
Nice. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Beans, for joining us once again. Don't forget to follow us on our socials, Life in the Stands podcast on YouTube and Stands_Life on Twitter.